probably starting as early as, golly, 20 years ago when, there were sort of initial conversations around AI. I know it's been around even longer than that, but about the ethical concerns, I always struggled with. So, and for me, it was in the context of what could we create, right, with AI, human-like capacities. And I just thought, theologically, I really struggled because I'm like, so God's the creator. We're here to help with God, but we're not here to be God, right? And so I really struggled internally with what does it mean for us to be able to create things that prior to this were only of God's prerogative, right, of God's sort of capacity. Then over the last 5 years, I've begun to recognize, man, there really are, and my struggle, by the way, I apologize, my struggle was we don't have the ethics to catch up to what we can do versus what God can do.
That was Reverend Daniel Humbert, the senior pastor at Trietsch Memorial United Methodist Church in Flower Mound, Texas. Thank you for listening to the Life Plus God podcast. My name is Alyssa Robinson. I'm your host. And today we are asking the question, how should Christians engage with technology? And the reason that I'm interested in this question is because it seems not only in this church body that we're in, but in many other churches that I've had conversations with, there seems to be this ongoing debate around how much is too much when it comes to technology. And there are some people in the camp of, church should be completely tech-free. It's a distraction. You shouldn't be involved with technology. We shouldn't be live streaming services. We shouldn't have online Bible studies. You shouldn't be feeling like you're in a church community if you only participate online. And then we have people in the complete opposite camp who they feel like they are a member of a church community, but they only worship online. They only attend Bible studies online. They get all of their content from apps like the Bible app to do devotions and reading plans. And then there are some of us who are right down the middle who are like, well, yeah, both work. So I want to have an honest conversation today about where we sit in terms of technology, how we individually use technology as Christians, and how we should embrace or maybe not embrace technology as a church. So Daniel, thanks for being a part of this conversation. I don't know if you've ever had anyone come to you and say, why are we doing all this technology stuff?
Well, it's good to be here, first of all. But secondly, in this very congregation, as you well know, we have people, all the people you just described, right? And everybody in between. So good stuff.
Yeah. So let's just start with broad terms. What is your general perspective on the intersection of faith and technology?
Well, I'm in favor. I believe it's real. I believe it's a helpful thing. I believe we ought to leverage technology to the best of our ability to help people in their spiritual journey. I think we're doing that pretty dang well, thanks in large part to you and some of your team members. I think it's an important thing. I think there are distractions for and from technology, and there are ways for it to be used very well and beneficially for faith development.
What are some of the specific upsides and downsides that you see about incorporating technology into your faith practice?
Yeah, well, immediately on the downside is simply the ways in which people can use technology that aren't beneficial to faith, whether that's to promote negativity or hatred or things of that nature that we unfortunately can experience either through social media or other channels. But on the positive side, there are so many other positive ways, right? So we can use technology in our prayer life. We can use technology for worship. We can use technology to connect with people in relationship. We can use technology to help us develop a better understanding of Scripture and or connect literally with Scripture through technology. To me, all of those are positive and ways that can help us engage technology that grow us in a faith relationship. So by golly, why not?
Do you see technology as a way to build relationship? Because I think that's where a lot of people disagree. We have people who are like, well, relationship happens in person. with using technology, you can only go so far in connecting with another human being if you're doing it through the barrier of a screen. And then there are other people who are like, no, I feel fully connected when I'm chatting with someone online or watching worship.
Yeah, and so I do think it really is dependent on the individual, that is, say, how they connect with technology and how it helps them in relationships. And I'll just say this about my own personal understanding. Until the COVID pandemic, I was an intellectual believer that relationships were possible through technology, but I couldn't fathom how it actually worked. I have to just own and recognize that. But once we went through the pandemic and literally we had small groups and Bible studies and staff meetings and even to a lesser degree, but certainly to a degree, pastoral calls via technology, I became a believer, right? It's like, this literally does happen. It can happen. And I watched that and witnessed that on lots of different levels, depending on the venue, if you will, whether it was a Bible study or a prayer thing or a life group or a staff meeting or a teaching opportunity. Relationships were being built and relationships were being had. Now, for me personally, it is not a preference. It is not a necessary go-to. But I believe it's very real and very possible to develop and nurture relationships via technology.
Mm. Looking back to that time pre-COVID, when you weren't fully on board with this idea of leaning so heavily on technology as a church, what were some of your fears that made you hesitant?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd call them fears so much as just lack of insight, lack of understanding. I mean, I'm an introvert by nature, and so I can have a relationship with myself all the better, right? And so I think it was just, so how does this work? I mean, it was the unknown, right? Having never really done it, I cannot recall, for me personally, a Zoom call or a Teams meeting prior to COVID. I may have done it, but I don't recall it at all. And so just in those simple formats, I began to witness through the pandemic how powerful they are. But prior to that, it was just, well, I'm told this can work, and I can see how people can connect, but I couldn't see back then how relationships could be nurtured and developed. And part of what I witnessed, as you are well familiar with, is, we have a couple of people who consider this their church, Trietsch Church, who don't live anywhere, don't even live in the state, right? And so they engage completely digitally, and they engage on virtually every level possible, right? They worship with us. They are in small group with us. They donate with us. They are now about to serve with us in ways that are special. And you're just like, that's what people do who are here in person. Mm-hmm. Those are all the levels that people can engage in person. And so now these people can engage in all those levels digitally. Yeah. How cool is that?
Well, and obviously I'm biased because I am the digital strategist at this church. I'm all in on technology and the benefits, and I so much so that I've made a career out of it, and I've chosen to serve in ministry using this skill set. But I can even see the downsides. And you mentioned that you're an introvert. I'm also an introvert. And I think that sometimes technology enables me to live into my most reclusive tendencies. I get anxiety in large groups. And so I think that sometimes I use technology as a crutch. And I think it's helpful for me when I'm having an especially anxious day to have a quiet space of I can worship in my living room. But other times I think that maybe I'm not feeling anxious and I'm just like, but I don't want to be around all the people, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for me. I think a lot of extroverted people would say that's a bad thing. You need to go and be in relationship in person. But I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's up to the individual. I think with what you just shared, there is nothing either wrong or right with the desire to be around people and or use technology for those relationships and connections. I think it depends on the people. So do I believe that relationships can be stronger or more engaging in person, I think the potential is stronger. But I don't think it's necessarily that way for everybody. So I think that's why we want to leverage it where we can, use it for the betterment of people's relationship with Jesus and others, and where it's not working, then either try to perfect it or acknowledge that it's not for everybody.
Yeah. And I think that another downside that I want to acknowledge is specifically with social media, the toll it can take on our mental health.
Ooh.
And it's hard. I wrestle with this all the time as someone who is using this in terms of ministry. Is Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, are these healthy places for us to be engaging with our congregation? Or are we feeding into the ongoing crisis of FOMO and inauthenticity and seeing people posting all of these pictures of people who look like they're doing great when the truth is we all have our stories, we all have our issues that we're not necessarily showing on social media. We're showing the absolute best days of our lives on social media. And I wrestle with that. I'm like, man, are we doing a disservice by engaging on these platforms that can be so harmful to people?
Yeah, correct. And so, part of this has to speak into that reality. And we now know, both statistically and sort of scientifically, that social media can cause mental illness concerns, right? And we now know over these long years now that overconsumption and over commitment to those forms and platforms can cause damage. Mm-hmm. And so, number one, we just need to name it like in any other sphere that this is a reality, can be a reality. So the other thing then for me personally becomes, so how do we leverage it for positivity? How do we leverage it in ways that can help people rather than cause harm? And I think you and your team have done that tremendously well. And some of that takes shape in forms like, so how do we push positive messages, helpful messages, and authentic messages rather than what I just call the persona or the facade or certainly the negative and hateful stuff, right? I mean, we're never going to be about that, right? So part of the way we want to leverage it in the life of the church and the ministry of the church is, how can we help people in their relationship with Jesus? That's why we exist, right? And how do we do that through social channels? And I think you do that, number one, positively. Number two, with authenticity and genuineness. And a part of that means sometimes there's struggles in faith. Sometimes there's struggles in life. In other words, owning that and reality, right, and acknowledging that. And then thirdly, to be an encourager, not just positive messages, but also encouraging messages that help people in their day-to-day life and struggles and things like that. And then to engage people through the social channels with spiritual practices like prayer or scripture, or again, even engaging in worship and community. All of those are great ways to leverage something that has negative potential for the positive.
I mean, I guess it's the same calling as we have in person of go where people are and be the light, right? Be like Christ. Right. And so I guess the fact that we're engaging on these platforms would be the same as somebody going to the bad part of town and engaging in what's considered the seedy areas or whatever. Yeah. It's the same idea. And Facebook's a bad part of town sometimes.
Yeah. Now you made me literally think of something that I had never thought of before. So with that analogy, and I've had several clergy colleagues over the years do that very thing in very unique ways, i.e., I remember in Wichita Falls, a clergy colleague of mine, forewarned his church, made preparations in advance, and he would, on a weekly basis, go to adult entertainment facilities to witness and to help both the trafficked women and the patrons, right? Clearly the seedy side of town, clearly not somewhere, a pastor would normally be. And yet, this is a way to witness to the faith and to be the light. Now bring that into, for instance, like you said, the seedy side of Facebook, if you will, and other platforms. What would that look like for churches, and I'm literally just thinking off the top of my head, for churches to be the light in those dark posts and dark presentations that are there. Because I will just own personally, my whole philosophy has been stay away, don't engage, right? And for me, sometimes that's a challenge because there are many a time when I want to engage with somebody on Facebook or Instagram in particular, just because those are my go-to platforms, to say, no, that's wrong and that's evil. And why would you think that or do that or say that? And my initial gut is don't engage because it's a no-win situation. So I'm now thinking out loud, what might it look like to engage that? And I don't have an answer.
Well, I have the same fear around that, and it's hypocritical of me. So I manage all of these Trietsch platforms and channels. I personally do not use social media at all. If you go to my personal social accounts, you'll see I haven't posted anything since 2019 because I realized in 2020, this is bad for my mental health.
Yep.
I'm engaging in conversations I don't need to be engaging with. I'm doom scrolling. I'm doing all of the bad behaviors, and it's giving me a negative outlook on the world. And so here I am as Trietsch posting in all of these places, but as Alyssa Robinson, you're not seeing anything.
Yeah.
And it's that fear of like the times that I have engaged, people are bold when they're protected by the anonymity of a screen.
Right.
And they don't have to say it to your face.
Correct.
You know? And so it feels like a never ending spiraling of negativity when you engage in those things. And it's like, there is no right thing to say. Even if you say, hey, I love you, I hope you're doing okay.
Yeah.
You'll get a barrage of anger.
Yeah. It was, you're absolutely right. It was for me personally why I started now. It was sometime in 2017 when I saw on social media for me personally, so much negativity and so much, problem highlighting of everything going on in our country in particular. And I just thought, the way I'm going to choose to engage with that is to do something positive. And so that's when I personally started posting scriptures from YouVersion and every single day. And I thought, number one, it's from my source of support, Scripture. And number two, it speaks into my faith. And then number three, my hope and goal was that would be a positive message out there in the social media world that wasn't caustic and negative and hate-mongering and all of those things. And initially it was post with no engagement, right? No statement, no comment, no nothing. And then people began to engage a little bit. And so periodically I would engage. So mine is very... it's not focused on engagement. It's really just focused on getting a positive message out there on a personal level.
Yeah. And I think that can be part of the mental health crisis as well, is we feel validated when people like or comment or engage in some way. And there's this fear, especially for our young minds of people who are in those formative years of teenagers, early 20s, of, okay, if I put something out there and nobody engages with it, then that means I'm not valuable.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's almost a no-win, isn't it?
Yeah. But to be able to say, I'm just going to put something positive out there, and I don't care if nobody sees it. This is for me and my relationship with God.
Right.
I think that that's a really healthy way to look at it. That takes all of us years to get to that point of confidence and security to feel that way. Because I know plenty of people in their 40s and 50s who are caught up in the likes and the influencers and how many friends do I have and, you know, all of that.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, how can we, so you talked about some ways that you personally have changed the way you use social media. How can we use it in a way that reflects our faith and values and avoid getting caught up in the negativity or superficiality found online? Do you have any like tips for us?
You mean the church or for us individually?
Individually, as we're engaging in these online environments. And I keep defaulting to social media because that's where most of us engage.
Yeah.
How do we avoid
Yeah.
all of the minefields.
Right. Well, there's any number of things to do, and I'm not going to profess to have all the answers by any stretch. I can just tell you some of the things that I choose to do. And there is a meme that I've seen many times out there that, and I won't get it exactly right, but it says something to the effect of, I saw a post with which I vehemently disagreed, and I actually just moved on and didn't do anything with it. And I thought, well, there's some wisdom, right? In other words, life goes on. I don't have to engage, right? I don't have to join the mudslinging or whatever. So that's one step, is simply to acknowledge I don't have to engage at all, right? If I choose to, fine, but I don't have to. In other words, I'm not compelled to. The other is I just have this mantra, keep it positive, keep it positive. So if I choose to engage, for me personally, it's always just going to be positive. I'm going to affirm the person, or I'm going to offer a word of encouragement or whatever, because I see that as my role, right? That doesn't have to be everybody, but that's what I choose to do. Another is, now this is professional/personal. And so as the pastor of a congregation, one of the things that I use social media for is to, what's the word? I just lost the word. Where I just kind of sleuth, right? Where I'm just kind of, what's that called?
Stalking?
Not stalk. Is it stalking?
Lurking.
Lurking.
Yeah.
I think lurking is what I'm looking for. I learn a lot about our congregation by what I see, right, in terms of social media. And so I rarely respond. I'm just kind of seeing. And sometimes what we witness is the pains and struggles somebody's going through. Other times what you see is, of course, the positive stuff, which you want to celebrate with people, but you also want to, this is internal with me, I also kind of want to go, well, so is that real or is that put on, right? There's that skeptical part of us. But in all of it, occasionally we find out pastoral care needs, right? Somebody's in the hospital or whatever. Now, the trouble there is, number one, we clearly can't see everybody's posts. And so some people, I think, believe that because they've put it on social media, the church already knows, right? Or the church ought to know. And that we can't rely on that. I put that out there so that people know that it is good to share that information, but it's also not a guarantee that that's the way we would know as a church. I think it's just important to recognize for one's mental health and for one's social engagement that we keep stuff just as positive as we can be, and yet also be genuine, both genuine in terms of what's going on in our lives, but also genuine in the way we want to respond. I'll tell you another thing I've done, and again, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but through all of the sort of tumult of, political persuasions and opinions and thoughts and all that kind of stuff, I've unfollowed a bunch of people. I just realized for my own self, I could not see that on an ongoing basis because it just eats away at my mind and my heart.
And you just get that spike of anger and the adrenaline that comes from that every time you see a post from this person. And
correct.
You got to realize that is not healthy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then I wonder out loud, I guess really more internally than out loud, but what does that then mean about my social interaction? I mean, because what that, of course, does is create a vacuum of thoughts, beliefs, and opinions, right? I'm only going to follow people that I agree with.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily healthy either.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think it's easy to get into confirmation bias of like, well, the way I think is the right way because
Clearly.
Everybody that I'm friends with agrees with me.
Yeah, it's demonstrated right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where the in-person experience can be so helpful in the more divisive topics and areas.
Right.
Because this person who posted something on Facebook with very dualistic mindset is posting in imperatives as if their way is the right way and there is no other way to think. And if you think differently, then you're an idiot is the way that it comes across. And so we feel this yearning to respond and be like, you're off it. You don't get it. Like
I feel your energy. I feel your energy.
Over my words.
Yeah.
But if that happened in person, if somebody made a comment of, let's say, something political, that a policy, and they made a comment about it and you disagreed with it, the context of that in-person relationship, it would come off completely differently.
Absolutely.
My guess is it wouldn't be as anger inducing, or it wouldn't, maybe
be
they
as evocative, right? It wouldn't
yeah, maybe they wouldn't state it in the same way. They'd
Yeah.
choose their words a little more wisely.
Right. Tone might be different, and just knowing someone you either appreciate or cherish or in relationship with is literally right in front of you, you're going to choose your words differently.
Well, and for as far as tips go, that's one of the best tips that I was taught when I did at my first job. Somebody walked me through email etiquette, which I think that we are all sorely lacking in,
Yes.
especially as text messaging, emailing has been the primary form of communication. We're just very casual, which is
Yes.
okay. But one of the tips that I received is, when you, the written word will always come across as flat or angry
Yes.
or short. Make it overly sugary sweet. It'll make you want to throw up. But when you send an email, and it doesn't mean like hedging or anything like that, but when you send an email, make sure that you are complimenting the person,
Yeah.
that you are making sure that your message is coming across in the most positive way, because I think our human nature
Yep.
is to read negativity.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested to learn why that is, because I know I do it too. When I get an email that's just like straight to the point, one sentence, I'm like, well, that was rude.
Yeah. What's up with you?
When if they had said that to me in the hallway passing by, I would have thought nothing of it, because I would have been able to hear their tone
Right.
and that it wasn't them being rude and it was just a question, or
Right.
they were just curious about something, and you can read a lot.
Yeah. Very truthful.
Yeah. So
But even
let's-
email, as antiquated as it now is still technology, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. We don't even think, we like to think about like the cutting edge technology of
Yeah.
like, oh, let's talk about VR and augmented reality and all these things. And the truth is, like, we are driven
Right.
by technology and everything that we do. We often say, the website is the front door, the new front door of the church.
Absolutely.
That is the first stop for every single person who steps foot in
Yep.
this church.
Yep.
So going into some of those platforms that help with your spiritual practice, on the more positive side of things, what are some of the digital platforms that you find to be very nurturing and empowering in your spiritual journey?
Yeah. Well, the most common one is, of course, YouVersion, which is a scripture deal that has, I forget anymore, you probably know, but, it is the most downloaded app in history. And I want to say it's like 1 billion downloads or something. I don't know what it is, but it's of course scripture, but it also has scripture readings. It has plans. You can exist in small groups right on the app. And so I use it for personal reading. I use it to post those scriptures that I mentioned earlier. And so it's the one that I engage the most. Another one is Reimagine the Examine, which was introduced to me a few years ago by one of our former pastors. And it's a prayer app. And so it's a way to pray and engage us in prayer. And then another one that's literally just called Lectio Divina, which is a form of prayer. And that app as well is just helpful to engage me in a practice that helps me to know God better, right?
I think it's actually called Lectio 365.
There is one called Lectio 365.
Oh, there's two different ones?
Yeah.
Because I've done the Lectio 365. I love that one.
Yeah.
And it's daily meditations. And so it's not reading, and it's like less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so basically you just hit play and I sit with my eyes closed and listen to it and let it begin my day.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And so another one that is not a faith-based app at all. In fact, it's really for a completely different purpose, but I use it from time to time for both meditation and prayer. And it is a white noise app that has all different kinds of white noise.
Is it the Calm app?
No, it's just called white noise,
Oh,
literally.
okay.
And I use it to go to sleep with. I won't bore too much, but started off for travel purposes when I struggled to go to sleep with traveling, and now I use it every night to go to bed, but with different sounds. But I use it as well to meditate by, because it helps me to, just drowned out everything else, right? Because it has everything from traditional white noise to, water, to birds, to frogs, to grasshopper, any kind of noise that could become white noise, including fans and air conditioners and all that kind of stuff. But it's a fascinating use of something not intended for that purpose, but can be used for spiritual purposes. Those are some of the ones I use. Now, there's all kinds of other ones out there. There's all kinds of scriptural, apps that you can use. Another one that started as a website and also has an app is BibleGateway.com, or Bible Gateway is the app. And it, too, is a scriptural deal that's more designed to see various translations and the ways in which they can have impact on how you engage Scripture. But it's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, where I see technology to be the most exciting in faith journeys is all of the tools and resources at our fingertips.
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
When I was in like middle school or high school, I'd have to go down to the church library and sift through a ton of books, which like I never did, because who wants to go through all of that?
Yeah.
But to be able to access, or even topic-based, whatever it is you're struggling with. When I was going through my divorce, I heavily relied on technology, and I would look up prayers while going through divorce.
Absolutely.
I would look up Bible verses for comfort while you're going through a divorce, things like that. And I could get very specific. When it used to be, I would just flip to the concordance in the back of the Bible, and maybe the topic you wanted to find was there, and maybe it wasn't. Yeah,
well, so both for personal Bible study and certainly in my profession in preparing for messages, that's where Bible Gateway comes in tremendously handy, because what used to be this massive volume of a man, I hate getting old, where you find the word, why can't I think of that, in the Bible?
Encyclopedia.
Not encyclopedia, but anyway, that's all digital now and instant, whereas before you'd have to manually flip through a book, right, and find it all, and now it's literally at your fingertips. You talk about helping pastors in terms of saving time in sermon preparation. I mean, literally like scores of hours potentially.
Yeah, you would have had to have, back in the day, like 5 or 6 books opened, all spread out all around you to find all of the sources to support your message.
Yeah, and so Bible Gateway, in an instant, when you type in the word, we'll find everywhere in the Scriptures that word lands, or, so you've got... and you can find it in different translations and find it in the different books of the Bible. So all of that is a phenomenal gift to pastors, preachers, or teachers of the Bible, right? So that's really cool. And then just for personal Bible study, if you want to find out, golly, where does Scripture talk about prayer, or where does Scripture talk about faith, or talk about doubt even, man, you just type in the word and it tells you everywhere it talks about it.
Yeah. Well, so technology can easily become a little overwhelming, I guess I would say. I often, at the end of the week, on my iPhone, I get my screen time summary, and it's like, oh, your screen time's gone down to 7 hours a day. I'm like, what? What?
Yeah.
So how do you personally find a healthy balance between utilizing technology and it being a helpful and inspiring resource, and not letting it dominate your life?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be as transparent as I probably can be on this particular subject. In my season of life right now, I'm not in a healthy place. I'm using my phone way too much for sort of faith-based things, and I don't know what my hour usage is, but by golly, I'm not positive it's better than what you just described for yourself. But what the tools that I have used in days gone by is literally setting the phone aside, for instance, for periods of a time, whatever that was. So sometimes that was during meal times, when the family would sit down. It still is the rule of the house, if you will, that whenever we're eating, there are no phones at the table. We just, we abdicate. Other times are set aside a period, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, whatever you're comfortable with. Just say, for this next hour or this period of time, I'm not going to give myself access at all. I'm not doing that right now, and that's a problem. So I've got to re-engage that. Another is to say to yourself, to set limits with regard to how long you're going to be on any given app, particularly if it's an app that can lead us down what I call rabbit trails, right? Like the social media channels. To just say, I'll give myself 15 minutes or I'll give myself 30 minutes and then, set a timer or whatever and just say, okay, I've got to move on to something else, right?
I was really good at that until TikTok was invented. And I'm telling you, Daniel, when I come home at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I'll just get on TikTok for 30 minutes before I start making dinner. And then I look up and it's 8:00 at night. And I'm like, what happened?
Right,
and it's just, it is like candy for the brain.
Yes.
It is. And they design it that way.
Absolutely.
They don't want you to close the
Absolutely.
app. And they're like, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And it's so bad for you. And I can feel my brain melting, and I don't know how to stop. And it seems like even setting an alarm for myself, I don't know if that would work.
Yeah. But for some of us, right, in our household, one of us is good at when the alarm goes off, we just get up, and one of us is like, we'll hit the snooze like 5 times, right? So for some of us, alarms won't work because we'll just, whatever the metaphoric snooze is, we'll just, I'll just give myself 10 more minutes, right? Oh, I'll just give myself 5 more minutes. Yeah.
Especially for someone like me who I literally have no one to answer to. I don't have kids. I'm single. I'm not single, but I'm not married.
Yeah.
I live by myself, and it's just like, who cares? Who cares if I'm on TikTok for 2 or 3 hours at the end of the day? Like, it's not affecting anybody, but it's affecting me.
It is. It affects us all, and each one of them is different. That happens to be one of the apps or platforms that I'm not on, but I make up that they...
Don't do it, Daniel.
Well, don't they sort of, I'm making this up because I don't know, don't they sort of like just keep feeding you the reels and like when one's done...
You have to scroll through to the next one, but it's so easy to just like, it's the swipe on that For You page. They're feeding you exactly the content that you're interested in. And I just can't stop. And I start going down rabbit holes and it's just that 1 to 3 minute, dopamine hit. And then the next one, 1 to 3 minute dopamine hit. And then the next one. And so I with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about, as a church, because I think that this is something that we're going to have to wrestle with more in the future. Are there concerns about the ethical use of technology, like how we navigate issues like privacy, digital addiction, ethical implications of new technology advancements that might be like AI, know?
Yeah, and that's definitely a struggle I have to own myself because I have just what I call a love-hate relationship with AI as I understand it, and I have to put that caveat because I don't fully understand it. But probably starting as early as 20 years ago when, there were sort of initial conversations around AI. I know it's been around even longer than that, but about the ethical concerns, I always struggled with. So, and for me, it was in the context of what could we create, right, with AI, human-like capacities. And I just thought, theologically, I really struggled because I'm like, so God's the creator. We're here to help with God, but we're not here to be God, right? And so I really struggled internally with what does it mean for us to be able to create things that prior to this were only of God's prerogative, right, of God's sort of capacity. Then over the last 5 years, I've begun to recognize, man, there really are, and my struggle, by the way, I apologize, my struggle was we don't have the ethics to catch up to what we can do versus what God can do, and therefore we need to, put the kibosh on this until we figure that part of it out.
Or even with new technology, it's going to be the unethical people who take it and run with it first.
Exactly, right, because that's the way it always works, right,
yes.
in any endeavor.
And so then we're trying to pick up all the pieces of like, oh my gosh.
Right, and that still is a fear. I have to own that. It still is a fear. But as I've come to understand other purposes or venues, if you will, for AI that aren't simply what I refer to as human characteristics or human qualities that AI can, supplant, like GPT or other things, where they can speed our process of research, and they can help us achieve things that are expedited, I guess, for lack of a better word. Man, why not leverage that kind of a thing for good, just like we've been talking about, right? And so I know, for instance, you use these resources to help create things and help make your job easier, if you will, and still accomplish as much, if not more, because of that. I think that's a great thing, and we ought to leverage those kinds of things. I think my question comes, and where other people, I'm sure, struggle is when it comes to sermon preparation, or when it comes to teaching, or when it comes to things like that. What is the ethical use of these new technologies that glean information, offer data? And my caution to myself and anybody is always cross-validate, because they're not going to be 100% accurate.
I mean, AI is, ChatGPT specifically, is just sending out, bots to crawl the entirety of the internet pre-2021, which is important to note. Nothing within the past 2. Yeah, so it's only pulling information because it can only do so much archiving, right?
Yeah.
And so pre-2021, and so
what's the date?
Anything? I think it's just as new versions come out, it incorporates more years into it. But like there are things like if you ask ChatGPT to create a summary of the Barbie movie, it can't do it because the Barbie movie came out after 2021.
That's
so
fascinating.
It's not crawling
I did not know that
information. So I think that we have to be careful because it's not the most updated information. I think I often treat it as a starting point to help me get organized or to help. And it's almost like participating in a brainstorm with a robot, and building from there. But the thing that I worry about in terms of ethics that I see happening already is the loss of jobs of people. We see graphic designers being put out of work because they're like, well, we can just have AI do it. And there's this huge, argument going on at Disney right now because they used AI to create one of their Marvel series intros.
Oh, wow.
Instead of hiring people to do it. And that I feel like, man, I don't trust our capitalist society to what the hope is like, okay, AI is going to support us so that we can work less. But that's not really how our society works. It's like, no, now we want even more out of you.
Right. Well, see, that was the argument. I'm old enough to remember this argument. That was the argument about PCs, right? Was
they're going to replace humans.
Yeah, and they're going to save us time. I don't know any PC that's ever saved me time, right? I mean,
well,
anyway.
If you went back to a typewriter, you might disagree.
Yes and no. I mean, because here's what happened. We ended up typing more on the keyboard, right? Because we could type more. So it didn't save time. It actually created more work because we could do more work. So anyway,
that's the thing is like as a society, we are the most productive than we have ever been. And we work more than we have ever worked. And we're paid less than we've ever been paid.
Oh, come on. That's another podcast.
No, it's true. It's true. And so we have this idea of like the ethics around this is around how do we treat people? How do we prioritize human beings and we're not exploiting people as a culture?
Yeah, no, I agree.
It applies. It applies.
It does. It does. The other thing I'm fascinated by, and you could confirm this, because I've only used literally ChatGPT 3 times, all of which were kind of experimental, right? Just kind of trying to figure it out. And I'm fascinated by this one concept that I'm told is a part of it, that there's almost a real sense of relationship that you have to enter into with ChatGPT about, asking questions and, giving it more parameters or giving it more guidance, like conversation, right? So that it can help you more and so that it can be more accurate or more consistent or more appropriate to what you're literally looking for or seeking.
Yeah. I actually think that this could become a new skill set and job in the future is people who write AI prompts.
Yeah.
Because it is a science
Yeah.
to write an AI prompt that gives you an output of exactly what you want to the quality of work that you desire. And it's kind of an art and a science to put in the correct prompt, because some people are like, oh, this is completely worthless. And I'm like, well, all you did is say, give me a chicken recipe.
Right.
Like, give it more instruction.
Yeah. And so I'm fascinated by that because it really is both, like you say, I mean, it's science and art, and it's also, to a degree, a kind of relationship with a computer, right? Or with a bot or whatever, because you are sort of asking or engaging on multiple levels, different kinds of questions or different kinds of parameters.
Yeah. And then, oh man, this could open a whole can of worms. And it makes me think of Star Trek, where they're talking about like the AI. So Data is and my partner and I talk about this all the time. Data is a character on Star Trek Enterprise, on USS Enterprise, Next Generation. And he is an AI being. And there was this whole episode around, does he have rights? Does he have... does he have feelings? Does he have emotions? Should he be paid? Should he be taken care of? Because he's just AI.
Yeah.
But like, he felt like he did have rights. And so it seemed like a silly concept at the time, but fast forward to 2022, and this story came out about an AI robot that was working in a warehouse for less than a week, and it shut itself down because it hated it so much.
Oh, wow.
The repetitiveness of it, which is like what we want robots to do, is like that repetitive, tedious work. And this AI bot, and it was either in an Amazon warehouse or something, it was experimental. And it literally, I mean, it shut itself down.
Yeah.
It ended its AI experience because it was like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So really are there ethics around even how we're treating AI? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think the shorter answer is yes, right? And I continue to both support the use of AI in the life and ministry of the church and challenge ourselves to constantly be thinking through the ethical and moral ramifications. We just have to.
Yeah, I think that. And sometimes when new technologies like this come out, we think, oh, great, I can turn my brain off and just submit something. And we just have to be critical thinkers about absolutely everything that's coming at us.
Yeah, so it's an instrument or a tool, not an end in itself.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Right. I don't want this to be a ton of gloom and doom and all of that, because I am very positive about the future of technology with the church. Yeah. I am personally investing my time into the future of technology with the church. What are some of the ways that you see outreach and connection happening specifically at Trietsch through digital media?
Wow. I may not be the best person to answer that, to be perfectly blunt, but a couple of the ways that I'm aware of is, we use what I call low-tech stuff, right? Texting and email to connect with people on lots of different levels, whether it's, and certainly some of this is actually post-COVID, as we became unable as pastors to visit people in the hospitals because of COVID. Even now, while it's certainly much more available to us to re-engage in the room for a patient, we now use technology to help engage people a lot more. We're praying over the phone more than we ever did before. We're using texting and email to connect with people who, maybe literally all the way on the other side of the Metroplex for their early morning surgeries or whatever, right? So we engage in that way. We also engage, again, through the trolling on social media when we discover medical concerns or health concerns or personal family issues because somebody's posted it, and we sometimes will respond via the social channels as well. So that's another form.
I want to clarify. You're not trolling. That's not the word you're looking for. Trolling is the people who leave negative comments on everything and are always adversaries.
Thank you. Yeah. Stalking.
I just want to make it clear, everybody, Daniel is not going to be trolling you on your social channels.
Thanks for helping me out. Yeah. Yeah. So those are some of the ways. I can't think of others right now.
Well, a story that I love to share, which just fuels me. And if you have more stories like this that you've heard, please share them with me because I love to hear them and it keeps me going.
Yeah.
So this is something that happened over a year ago and I still bring it up all the time because it meant that much to me. At the beginning of 2023, we did a worship series called Asking for a Friend. And in that series, we were asking some of the most common questions about God and faith that we were finding in Google search results.
Yeah.
And one of those questions that we covered is, why are there so many hypocrites at church? And this is, a huge question for a lot of people. And it is, for most people who say, I don't go to church anymore, one of their top 3 reasons is hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And so this is something that people constantly struggle with. So we did this worship service in which Pastor Gracie preached on hypocrisy in the church. And then later that week, she got an email from somebody who lives in California who said, hey, I just wanted to reach out and thank you. I live in California. I am a regular attendee and member at my home church. And I just had an experience of hypocrisy in my church that angered me so much that I was determining whether or not I even belonged in this church anymore. And I decided not to go to church on Sunday. And I Googled, why are Christians such hypocrites? And I ran across your live stream and I watched you preach about hypocrisy in the church. And he said, it encouraged me and I'm going to go back to my church next week. And by the way, here's a donation to Trietsch. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that is a cool story.
Yeah. And it gives me goosebumps every time I tell it because I'm like, this is what we're trying to do. There are no walls in digital media. And the fact that we were able to reach someone on that morning halfway across the United States, and because of our Sunday morning message, they felt encouraged and empowered to step foot back into their church community that they were struggling with. And as a thank you, they gave a gift to Trietsch.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not the end goal for everything,
right,
but it's a beautiful expression of gratitude.
Yeah. No, I think the totality of that story just expresses really everything we wanted to talk about today, right? What a great story.
And there's so many stories of outreach and connection through our members where digital media has been the conduit for them to reach people and engage with people and invite people.
Yeah. I also remember, and we haven't tracked this in quite some time, probably well over a year, maybe even 2, where we tracked where we were being watched online through worship. And you remember it was over 22 nations. And I think all but maybe 1 U.S. state. I mean, it was pretty phenomenal, right? That's really cool.
And it's grown since then too. Yeah. So this has the potential for amazing reach and connection and hope for people all over the world. And man, one of the comments that Denise made on a past podcast episode is, man, could Jesus have ever imagined what we're doing right now, the reach that we have right now, the ability to love and support people all over the world? Because in his time, it was literally where you are, it geographically was your sphere of influence.
Right.
And here, we can make a donation to support disaster relief halfway around the world. And we can send a word of encouragement to someone in India or the UK. I mean, there's so much potential. And that, for me, is what gets me really excited about technology is, man, the expanse of love and hope that we can bring to the world through this little cell phone right here.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It is a gift.
So lastly, for Christians who might feel a little overwhelmed or unsure about how to engage with technology responsibly, what advice would you offer to them to navigate the digital age with wisdom and faith?
Wow. So just a real simple question.
Yeah, just parting words, a couple sentences. Yeah, I thought you were supposed to have advice in the can at all times.
Yeah.
Isn't this what you went to seminary for?
This is what you want to wrap up with. Okay, sure. All I can say is give it a try first, right? Just try something with which you're unfamiliar. If that's some of the social channels, try it out. If it's worshiping online, try it out. So first of all, just try it. Don't be intimidated. Just try it. The second is discover what feeds your soul. If it's not feeding your soul, don't do it, right? I mean, you gave the great example earlier. When you got off social media, you took note, right? Both of what harm it had been doing and what benefit it was to stop it, right? So if it's not feeding your soul, just stop it. And then thirdly, I would just say capitalize on what can be beneficial for your heart, mind, body, and soul, right? That is the whole person, and take note of that. So clearly there are some great spiritual opportunities we just talked about, but there's also a sense in which things have spiritual impact that we're not always clear about, but can be there, again, both negatively and positively. So pay attention to those. Pay attention to feeling. Pay attention to how it sort of engages you or causes you to engage other people. And just act appropriately, I guess is the best word I could say.
Be on your best behavior.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Daniel, so
You bet.
much.
Good stuff.
The Life Plus God podcast is hosted, written, and produced by me, Alyssa Robinson, and sponsored by Trietsch Memorial United Methodist Church in Flower Mound, Texas. Check out Trietsch online at tmumc.org or in person to see if this church is a right fit for you and your family. We'd love for you to visit us soon. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and rate us on your podcast platform to help other people find our content. Join us next week and let's keep growing in relationship with Christ together.